Boom goes the dynamite. It's the Big 5-0 on the Bottom Line podcast. It's crazy to imagine that I'm already here at 50, and what better way to do it with the 20th edition of my MMA Tailored Bottom Line. I am the host of the Bottom Line podcast, Davidson Baker. I'd like to thank you for joining me, whichever service that you have decided to. And joining me today over the airwaves of Google Hangout is my good friend from MMA Today. My man Max Freedman rejoins the program. How you doing today, man?
If you don't know, now you know. I was waiting for you to drop it.
If you don't know, now you know.
But
yeah, dude. I mean,
absolutely honored to be back on the Bottom Line. Great podcast. I think I've listened to probably at least 47 of the 50 episodes you've had. Definitely one of my go-tos every week. Love talking fights with you. Can't wait to break down this UFC Moncton card, and then as well as all the crazy news that's going on as we speak in the world of mixed martial arts.
As we speak, and we'll definitely touch on that. But I do have to express my gratitude, of course. Thank you very much for the kind words. I appreciate it. But also, yes, as we speak, there is some pretty crazy stuff going on in the stratosphere of mixed martial arts. And I think as my friend Max and I just kind of previously alluded to before we went on the air here live on YouTube via Google Hangouts, this is not going to be a space where we're going to beat the whole Conor and Khabib NSAC hearing like a dead mule. I think there's more important things to talk about, and obviously something that might transpire and transcend MMA history today is going down with the news reported by Ariel Helwani that Ben Askren might be very close, if not almost pretty much a done deal, to get swapped for 11-time defending champion in the flyweight division of the UFC, Demetrious Johnson, in what would be an unheralded and unparalleled type of move between MMA organizations.
Yeah, unbelievable to think that this might be a direction that we're seeing the sport head into, such a monumental occurrence to go down today. There's a lot of questions still up in the air. How do you trade independent contractors? Some people are posting on Twitter some of Zuffa's contract language up for interpretation there. It's my understanding that it's more of a release the fighters out of their current contract situation with a handshake deal, being that each of those fighters subsequently signs with the other promotion, but a lot more details to come. What are your thoughts on this thing? Ben Askren to the UFC, Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson to ONE FC. Initial thoughts, feedback. What do you got?
I think that it really goes to show how undervalued Demetrious Johnson was in the eyes of the upper executives of the UFC, and I think I think it's really sad. I don't believe per se that Demetrious Johnson was dealt, maybe the hand of fair play by the UFC that maybe he was rightfully owed. And I think that's kind of been apparent for a long time. Now, obviously, the arguments that could come back to that are his pay-per-view numbers and the total draw, effect that he would have had or whatever. We need to face the facts here, though. He defended his championship belt 11 times. And I think that goes above and should oversee just about any other kind of maybe narrative that you could patch next to it. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, agreed. Demetrious Mighty Mouse Johnson, one of the best champions regardless of weight class of all time, but I think his last payout was something like the 6th highest of all the UFC champions during the year 2018. So definitely not getting the respect he deserved from the UFC brass. You could point to the pay-per-view numbers, you could point to the results. Regardless, it's definitely clear that over in Asia, the lighter weight classes have a bigger draw. Names that come to mind with ONE FC, guys like Bibiano Fernandez and Martin Wynn. I mean, just you start to think about some big time matchups over there for Mighty Mouse where he may end up fighting. Ben Askren, though, a guy that's been considered one of the best fighters outside the UFC his entire career, will finally get an opportunity to test himself against the top promotion in the world. So dream matchups are coming in left and right on Twitter. Really excited to see where he ends up getting placed should this deal go through and should he sign with the UFC. But lots of different options both ways. Really good to see that we could have something new in the world of MMA coming here with these contract negotiation trades among promotions.
Right. And, because MMA is an individual sport, and an individual sport, not to compare it or shed the light per se of it into as where boxing is concerned with so many different promoters. Tennis is all, if you're a professional tennis player, you're going to play at Wimbledon and the US Open every single year under the same governing body. If you are one of the best golfers in the world, you're going to play at the Masters and play in the US Open, probably play on the PGA Tour. In MMA, it's different because with these singular contracts that can be made for individual promotions, it doesn't really tailor a whole lot into the world of co-promotion and the creativity of making matchups. But now that there's this aspect of trading becoming possible, and Scott Coker seems like he might want to dabble in the fun a little bit too. I saw him tweet trades with the little thinking emoji and a light bulb. If we are crossing into a world where trades are about to become imminent in the world of MMA, I'm ready to grab a seat in the front row and pop popcorn for it.
100%. I thought it was big when the UFC had that negotiations with M1 Global earlier this year to release some of their fighters to fight on their Moscow card. Now starting to think of some of these ideas and possibilities the sport may be headed. Sign me up too.
Yeah, dude, totally. Like, could you let's play hypothetically here for a second. Like, sticking in the welterweight division, if all the possible trades, I saw one earlier that was pretty interesting. People have been throwing out hypothetical trades. What do you think about Bellator and the UFC? Let me see if I can remember all of these guys. Somebody said, what would you think of the potential deal? Cyborg and Mighty Mouse to Bellator for Elimale McFarlane. I don't know if I can remember that. I think it was Elimale McFarlane, Douglas Lima, and a couple others. I think maybe Vadim Nemkov and somebody else. I can't really get your full per se on it without remembering the exact details of it. But these are really interesting thoughts that we now are kind of carried to think about.
Yeah, and if you're going to trade Chris Cyborg to Bellator, you better be getting Aaron Pico or Dylan Dennis in return on that.
Pico was the other person. Pico was the other person.
Yeah. But seriously, the thought of the dream matchups that could be made, should this become more of an occurrence in the sport, absolutely changes the landscape of the entire sport. And we could be seeing the dream of having one champion from another champion actually squaring off, and really figuring out who the best pound for pound fighter is in the world.
I think that's the way to do it, man. And I applaud, MMA as a sport. Without really having anybody solely responsible for this narrative being a thing, and that particularly in the UFC and in a couple other promotions, respectively, in certain weight classes, really put the best up against the best. And you don't see that in boxing, where guys will defend their belt 4 or 5 times before they actually get tested. You don't see that in MMA. And now with this type of culturally transcending narrative that we could be crossing into, yeah, I agree. I'm all in on it, man. I'm all in on the created kind of aspect of the unknown, pretty much.
Yeah, and as exciting as this is, I hope it does not overshadow the great UFC fight card we have coming up this weekend. UFC Moncton,
Yes,
heading back to Canada for UFC Fight Night. Some great light heavyweight action to headline this guy.
Yes, sir. If not, without further ado, let's dive all into it. UFC Fight Night 138 is Saturday night, airing on Fox Sports 1 in the States. Following some prelims on UFC Fight Pass, and we're going to dive into the whole thing. And obviously, we must start at the top of the bill with nothing other than the main event. So, a couple things right off the bat. Volkan and Lionheart, to me, feels incredibly mysterious, just because nothing really gives in one direction. You have a couple of guys that are both incredibly heavy-handed. You got a couple of guys that like to finish fights early. Volkan getting his nickname No Time off of that exact kind of stigma that he's carried with early knockout wins over Misha Cirkunov and Jimmy Manuwa on his record. However, you feel like with Anthony Smith, despite only this being his third fight in the light heavyweight division, Anthony Smith, has 43 professional fights in comparison to Ozdemir's 17, and Ozdemir has already tasted what it's like to, fight for a title. And I think you could maybe argue this is the biggest fight of Smith's career. Well, what do you think, man? I think that nothing's really giving me a clear-cut direction on who to go with as far as my personal pick for the winner between these two.
Sure. It's a great fight to headline the card, but it is a little mysterious considering how Anthony Smith is really a fresh face in the UFC light heavyweight division, and Volkan Ozdemir more or less is as well. I mean, he's come off that title loss at UFC 220 to Daniel Cormier, but that was only his fourth fight in the division. Love what Anthony Smith has done for his own career. I mean, taking himself to the light heavyweight division, seeing a shorter path to the top, knocking off the big names who aren't necessarily as dangerous as they used to be. Great from a career standpoint. Really smart, intelligent move by him and his management. He has that finishing ability. I love that he's working at Factory X, Mark Montoya, one of the most underrated gyms in the country. I'd say they should be considered for Gym of the Year behind Fortis MMA in Dallas.
Yep.
Ozdemir, like we said, coming off that loss, but has been absolutely itching to get back in there. Had a couple fights scratched for various reasons. He works down in Hard Knocks 365 with Henry Hooft. I'm excited to see Anthony Smith in some other matchups in the UFC light heavyweight division, but I just don't know if this is a favorable one for him. Volkan Ozdemir, heavy-handed, a true light heavyweight. I think he's going to get it done here. I'll go with the TKO late in the first round.
You're going Volkan.
Volkan, yeah.
Oh, Volkan. It's tough for me, man. I mean, before I kind of maybe give my winner on it, what would an emphatic stoppage do for a Volkan Ozdemir? You're sitting right up there at the number 2 light heavyweight in the world at the moment. You had the matchup with Alexander Gustafsson kind of fall through. We were told reasons that maybe I don't really per se believe. I'm not saying that Gustafsson faked an injury. I do think that the UFC did have bigger and better plans for him, though. But anyway, what would an emphatic stoppage kind of do for Volkan Ozdemir here? And same question for really Anthony Smith. We kind of know what it might do for Anthony Smith, take him right up there into that top 3 type of conversation. But Volkan Ozdemir, I mean, what kind of direction could the UFC go with him if he makes a statement here?
That's tough to tell because we do have that UFC light heavyweight title matchup coming up at the end of the year between John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson. You would think that a win here probably would put him in that number 1 contender spot with Alexander Gustafsson, but now that he's in the official title picture, it's a head scratcher. Not a lot of names come to mind when you think about potential guys that can fight for that number 1 contender spot. Dominic Reyes coming off a big win. There's one but who knows how quickly the UFC wants to rush him into such a high profile fight there. But I think an emphatic win here for Volkan sets him up for a number 1 contender spot. Whereas Anthony Smith, I think you put him in against another big time veteran. If Jimmy Manuwa is able to get his upcoming fight a victory in that one, maybe you match those two up. But man, the light heavyweight division, because it's so thin, you really never know.
I like the prospect of the winner of this fight maybe fighting the winner of Latifi and Anderson. I think that would make a lot of sense, especially because you look across the board, all 4 of those guys, I believe none of them have ever fought each other before.
Somehow those 4 have not fought each other.
So I think that potential avenue makes sense. For me, as far as going with the pick, I got to go with Lionheart, man. I'm going to go with Anthony Smith. I think that the move down to 205, or the move up, I should say, up to 205 pounds was a fantastic move for him. And now you see actually the last guy that beat him at 185, Thiago Santos, follow suit. And maybe a rematch could be in the cards down the line in a new weight class as well for those guys. It's a fight I'd be interested in seeing. However, I am going to go with Anthony Smith here.
What's the way to finish? He finishes the fight?
I do think that he gets the finish in the first round. I think that I think I would be equally as unsurprised if Volkan finishes Smith in the first round as well. I just think that these guys are going to come out swinging for the fences right away, and it's really going to be first one lands, man. Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Yeah,
I hope. I hope. So, moving on to the co-main event. First of all, let's address the true elephant in the room before we say anything here. The Zubaira Tugugov fight was the original co-main event for Artem Lobov, and maybe give me without spending too much time on it. Maybe give me some of your thoughts on the whole situation without going too much into anything like kind of regarding Conor and Khabib. We really beat everything to death with them over the past few weeks, and rightfully so. Well, what did you think about the subsequent cancellation of this fight? You know, as a result of what happened, and maybe how the UFC is handling Tugugov's situation.
Well, absolutely. The first move is to pull him off the fight, and I think that was the rightful choice, regardless of his contract situation, which still hasn't been fully published yet or made 100% certain on whether he will fight in the UFC again. But just, hitting a fighter who's in the cage after a fight, regardless of all the camaraderie that's going on outside of the cage, I mean, that's by all means, he was suspended. He was pulled off the card. Artem Lobov was pulled off the card for the whole UFC 223 incident involving the bus. I think it was the right move to make. But we'll see where that goes from there. I'm glad that Artem Lobov still has a fight on the card, because you hate to see the stupidity of one fighter lead to another fighter not having the opportunity to prove himself. But I actually kind of like this fight a lot better, and definitely more valuable of a co-main event slot when a fighter with Michael Johnson with more of a name recognition than Zubair Tukhugov. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this could be a fun one. The odds makers kind of looking at it maybe particularly in a different light. I've seen Michael Johnson as high as about -725. He's kind of hovering right now around -650 with Artem Lobov on the comeback at +475. I think those might be a little bit too wide. I would say though around the 4.5 to 5 to 1 favorite kind of tag probably fits Michael Johnson pretty well here. I think that but I will say this. Michael Johnson, in his last fight against Andre Fili, I noticed some substantial differences in his power. I didn't think a lot of shots that he was throwing at Fili were really affecting him. What do you think?
Well, he did say that it was the first time he weighed 145 pounds since wrestling in high school. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on, a weight cut. A lot of fighters do feel that they have the power advantage, but then we've seen it so many times and times again where they really don't. And then it's back when they're more natural weight class, they have that power advantage. The Andre Fili fight, I didn't think was overly impressive from either party. I think the decision could have gone both ways there, but notably, like you mentioned, big favorite for good reason. Johnson has had those big fight experience. He's got a pistol of a left hand. Questionable whether it'll be present at 145 pounds or not, but he's got that great movement. Works at Hard Knocks 365 with all the sharks that are there. And Lobov just seems like he might be a little too slow, stationary, doesn't really have the well-rounded skills to beat anyone in the top 15 of the division. I don't think Johnson gets the finish, though. Artem Lobov not been finished inside the UFC at all, despite his, I believe, 4 or 5 losses in the UFC. But I'll go with Johnson by a unanimous decision. Do you see anything else happening? Any chance that Artem cashes as that underdog?
No, I don't. I think this is kind of a bad matchup for Artem. I think that Michael Johnson is a guy that could probably go toe-to-toe categorically with just about every strength Lobov is going to try to exert. So at the end of the day, I am going to go with Michael Johnson. I may not have caught. Do you have him by finish? I think Michael Johnson gets a win by decision.
Yep, that's what I said too.
Cool. And the reason why I was distracted, because before we get into Cirkunov and Cummins, we actually have some breaking news. Damon Martin is reporting and tweeting out that he's hearing rumors and whispers going around, and inserts in all caps afterwards that this is not a done deal, but just a rumor at this time, that the UFC is looking to book TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo for the bantamweight title in early 2019. Not crazy about it, to be honest with you.
No, I'm not either. And to be fair, this could be another sign pointing to the UFC completely folding the men's flyweight division if this Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson trade actually happens. And now Henry Cejudo moves up a weight class. He's had notable weight cut issues getting down to 125. Maybe that's the bigger picture here, but I'm not wild about that either. You have quite a few killers in the top 5 of the men's bantamweight division. Thinking about Marlon Moraes, Dominic Cruz, who has a win over TJ Dillashaw. You have Rafael Assunção.
Also over TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, a win and a loss. But yeah, nonetheless, how do you do that? I mean, and then you got a lot of up-and-coming talent in bantamweight. It's a great time to be bantamweight now, and giving the title shot, the next title shot to Henry Cejudo doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if that's what they feel is going to sell, then got to do it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, no, I'm with you. You covered it all. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it was worth noting. Yeah, not crazy about that either. So moving on to the third fight up from the top on the card, we got Misha Cirkunov and Patrick Cummins. Cirkunov right now kind of hovering around the minus 460, and Patrick Cummins on the comeback at plus 360. This is a big fight for both guys. Both guys coming off losses, and Cirkunov looking to kind of make Cirkunov trying to avoid taking his third straight loss. A guy that started out 4-0 in the UFC now finds himself 4-2 and looking to avoid dropping his third straight against a guy who is actually in Patrick Cummins, who has miraculously spent 11 of his 15 fights throughout his career inside the octagon. What do you think about this matchup?
Yeah, you hit it, man. Both in coming off not just losses, but bad losses. Misha Cirkunov finished in his last 2. Patrick Cummins absolutely dominated by Corey Anderson in his last time out. Both in desperate need of a win, and Vegas showing Cirkunov some love with that 4-1 favorite line right there. Cummins, I could see him maybe scoring takedowns early, but can he keep that up for 3 rounds? I just don't see it. I think Cirkunov's able to keep him at bay with his striking, opening up his attacks. Cummins definitely tough guy to finish. The only one that comes to mind, or the 2 that come to mind, are the Daniel Cormier and Ovince St. Preux. But I can see Cirkunov just kind of keeping his distance, effectively landing some strikes in his adopted home of Canada and cruising to a decision win. Well, what do you see in that one?
I think that Misha Cirkunov is a guy that still can be a force in this light heavyweight division. Whereas per se, I think Patrick Cummins might be a little bit out of his element, and I'm trying to word this right. Potentially out of his prime, even though we don't really know potentially, what his prime might have been, just because the 6-5 clip in the UFC might not indicate one being in one's prime. However, I do see this fight hitting the ground relatively early, because Cirkunov is submission whiz, and Patrick Cummins obviously with the wrestling credentials that he has. It's going to depend on who has the edge when the fight hits the mat. And I think that edge is going to go to the Latvian Canadian Cirkunov, and I think he's going to sink in and rear naked choke in the second round.
I like it. Hey, one name we didn't mention, talking about light heavyweights, the number 3, Jan Blachowicz. Maybe he's the one that comes out, gets the winner of this upcoming main event too.
Yeah. I actually think that might make a little more sense.
Yeah.
I can't believe, keep forgetting about him. And what a run he's been on too. Stopping Nikita Krylov in his last fight. I think that would make a whole lot of sense for a main event.
Especially somewhere overseas too, between either one of them.
Yep.
Works well.
Definitely. Moving on. So we originally supposed to be Andre Sukumta and Gavin Tucker. Gavin Tucker pulls out, and now a fighter I've had the fortune of kind of watching tape on this week for my Octagon Jitter segment over at MMA Takeover, and Jonathan Martinez. He will get the short notice call to debut against Andre Sukumta. Sukumta is going to definitely be looking to make a statement after the disappointing kind of way his last fight with Sean O'Malley ended. I believe off the top of my head, without looking at my notes, Martinez has finished 8 of his 9 professional victories. It should be a good one here. I think Sukumta is just slightly over the 2-1 favorite at -220. Martinez.
You watch tape on Martinez all week. I'm eager to hear what you got to say on him, because he's one of those guys that's had a rough time getting regional fights due to that high finishing rate. Only one fight in the last 2 years. So I want to hear your thoughts on him, because I'm going to build off that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you hit the hammer on the nail right there. It seems to me, when I have kind of scratched the surface of tape watching Martinez, that a lot of these guys really are really not in his kind of stratosphere of talent. I feel like that he has not been tested, and at least not to the fortitude of what he is capable of being tested by. And I think Sukumta is going to give him that. It should be a very interesting kind of blend of styles. However, yeah, you hit the head on the nail, man. I think Martinez's high finishing rate probably warded off a lot of potential challengers on the regional scene, and we'll see if he can take the step up here. And how do you potentially see this fight playing out? I think Sukumta wins a decision.
Okay. So you see that Martinez gets the nod. There's so many regional talented bantamweights out there, and yet he's the one that's called in a flyweight moving up. To me, I'm getting kind of a deja vu with guys like Alexander Hernandez and Volkan Ozdemir, Jeff Neal, those guys that don't necessarily have a ton of tests on the regional circuit and had a lot of hard times getting fights, but somehow still were scouted and found by UFC talent relations. And, you know, this just a gut feeling. I have not watched any tape on Martinez, but he is 9-1, 8 finishes. His one lone loss was a DQ to Matt Schnell in a fight that, my understanding, he was winning. Sukumta just really hasn't done anything to impress since joining the UFC. Yeah, he had that Hail Mary victory over Luke Sanders, but he was far behind in that fight. His last outing you briefly touched on, but golden opportunity to take over from an injured Sean O'Malley, and somehow did not get the job done. Despite coming in late, I think Martinez is going to get it done here somehow with his young and exciting style. I'll go with a TKO in the second round.
Okay. That's a very interesting fight at 135 right there. Now we head back to 205 once again for a very this is an intriguing fight between Gian Villante and Ed Herman. Ed Herman, man, a member of season 3 of The Ultimate Fighter on Team Ortiz, right?
Shamrock.
He was on Team Shamrock. Yeah, I couldn't remember. That's right, because he had a lot of disdain towards Tito for not taking him. Yeah, I remember that now. It's been a while since I've seen.
Ultimate Fighter historian over here. I like it.
Yeah, man. It's been a while since I've seen Ultimate Fighter 3. Might have to dive into some of that. But Villante, and speaking of, I mean, you know, the welterweight division was in focus for Ed Herman now, and now he's all the way up to 205. Taking on a guy that, you know, in Gian Villante has kind of said before to the critics that have said, hey, why don't you use your wrestling, man? You know, why don't you use your grappling? He's like, nah, I'm okay. I'm all right. I don't need to do that. Why do you think that is? I think that he really wants to put on a show for the fans. But, man, if you got some wrestling chops, you got to use them, don't you think?
Yeah, 100%. He wrestled at Hofstra, which is a really top program in the Northeast. And being at Belmore Kickboxing and doing some work with Serlongo, working exclusively with Chris Weidman all the time, you'd think he'd be more prepared. And in some of these fights, he just it seems like he has no fight IQ when he has a golden opportunity to take these fights down and just doesn't. He does have some power. We've seen it in the past, but not the fastest guy, even at 205, and just seems to slow down really quickly as the fight wears on. It's a gritty veteran matchup here. Both are well past their best days are behind them. I can kind of see this fight going the same way John Volante's UFC 220 fight against Francimar Barroso did back in January, where it's kind of a back and forth, but Volante gets quite just a little bit better of the edge on the feet, and I'll take Volante with a split decision here. But either way, I don't see either one of these using this win to propel them into a top 15 matchup or a top 15 run.
I actually have Volante by first round stoppage. I think obviously Ed Herman has some tread on his tires, and I do think that these guys are going to throw right away. And in my opinion, that plays to the disadvantage of Herman. And Volante minus 250, Herman plus 210. I'll take the 2.5 to 1 favorite on that clip. So to kick off the main card, you got a TriStar product, Alex Garcia, who has kind of been trading wins and losses as of recently in the UFC, going up against a veteran in Court McGee at plus 160. What are your thoughts on this matchup at 170 pounds?
And I like Court McGee's story. He seems like a real good guy and professional in the sport, and he does have that win over Robert Whittaker, but he's never really had that dangerous ability to finish a fight, whether it's on the feet or the ground. I mean, he's lost 2 straight. He's 2-4 in his last 6. Garcia is kind of the opposite. Yeah, you said he's got those wins and losses, but he's most dangerous because he has that power and he has the ability to stop the fight. Considering his last fight was a loss to Ryan Flair, I'll give him the benefit of doubt. Say he gets it done here. He finds the chin of Court McGee, who's been around the block quite a bit, and gets the knockout. But otherwise, we could see another 3-rounder as well. I'll take Garcia with a knockout in the second round. Getting the win for the TriStar Gym in Canada. What do you got?
Yeah, me too. I got Garcia as well, minus 185. Court McGee at plus 160. I'm going to take. I believe his nickname is the Dominican Nightmare, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
I will take Garcia by decision, though. I think that it goes the full 3 rounds. So the featured prelim, though, probably to me is more of a coin flip than the main event. I mean, I think there is not a whole lot of give between Nordine Taleb and Sean Strickland, at also to be contested at 170 pounds. Really not sure why this isn't on the main card. I think this is a great fight. I think both guys are coming off tough losses. Taleb coming off that upset loss to Claudio Silva.
Bad loss in that one too.
Really bad loss in London. And then Sean Strickland coming off a devastating capoeira style spinning heel kick from Capoeira himself down in Sao Paulo. This is a big spot for both these guys, man. I mean, I don't think either of these guys really fit the bill of a lose 2 straight type of wear in the UFC welterweight division. And they're both going to be desperately looking to avoid that here.
Yeah. Are you a betting man, DB? I forget. I know you like to look at the lines, but you like to make plays? I
may or may not.
Okay. Well, this line first opened. I thought I had a great read on it. Taleb was, I think, a minus 165 favorite almost, or maybe closer to 175. Strickland, the comeback, I think, was plus 140 or 150. Yeah. Now he's at now it's a split even, both minus 110 on one side, minus 115 on the other. Yep. Strickland is the biggest, I think, Vegas liability right now on the card. This is a close fight, coin flip either way. I think Taleb seemed to have it figured out, and then that horrible loss in London to Hannibal Silva, coming off a 3-year layoff. He was dominating on the feet, somehow gets in a scramble, gets taken down, and gets submitted. He's a hard hitter, a veteran presence. Strickland, I think he's got some good success in the division, but that capoeira kick out of nowhere from Zaleski dos Santos, that was a highlight reel finish. And he's more of a volume striker, also a big man for the division, as is Taleb. I'll take Strickland to be a little bit more active and get that unanimous decision. But man, I thought for sure. I was like, oh, this is a dog play right here, and I didn't jump on it. And now look at the line.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts here? Who do you got?
Everything you just said, man. I mean, I should have jumped on the line too whenever he was at plus 150 or around that kind of area. And man, I'm sorry that I didn't. I'm going to go Strickland by unanimous decision here as well. I think he will be more active. I think Taleb will land some good shots, and both men will ultimately have both good moments. But Strickland may be having more to the point where he will best Canada's own Nordine Taleb. So the biggest favorite on the card, though, is Nasrat Haqparast, as he heads into his fight with a guy. Well, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but did think that was getting ready to be on the chopping block in Thibaut Gouti. I'm pretty sure his last fight was the Sage Northcutt fight, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, back in February in Austin.
Gouti won that fight, though.
It was close. It was close.
I wouldn't be in that category. I do think the rightful winner got his hand raised, but I think Gouti definitely put up a fair say in that fight. However, he is 1-4 in the UFC, and the odds are up against him to probably stick around here with one of the best prospects internationally in the lightweight division, in Nasrat Haqparast staring at him.
Thibaut Gouti must have the best management in all of MMA. So this guy gets finished on The Ultimate Fighter season 22 in attempts to get into the house by David Tamor. Somehow gets to the UFC, gets finished in 3 straight fights, twice in the first round, then gets another fight against Andrew Holbrook in which he wins because he's primarily a striker, had the far bigger striking advantage on the feet there. But then he's beaten by Sage Northcutt, like you said, a close fight, yet still getting another fight here. Not an easy fight, but yet another fight inside the UFC, an opportunity to keep his job alive. So, yeah, I agree with everything you just said. It's surprising to see that he's still in the UFC, considering he's in the deepest division in the sport and at lightweight, but not an easy fight indeed. One of the biggest up-and-comers in the sport, the mini Kelvin Gastelum, Nasrat Haqparast, definitely the guy to keep an eye on. Man, was he impressive in his last outing against Mark Diakiese, just completely outclassing him on the feet. Had an impressive run in his UFC debut, too. A very competitive fight against Marcin Held, but the TriStar product, I think, gets it done here pretty easily. I'll go a round 1 TKO finish. You see anything different?
I actually think that Haqparast is going to take his time and pick his shots. I think that I think the TKO does come, but I see it coming late. I see it coming round 3. I think that he really demonstrated some tremendous poise in that Diakiese fight. I thought he was not overly, committal to putting his foot on the gas. I thought that he took a slow and steady approach, and obviously, slow and steady wins the race. So, okay, this next one though might be one of the more interesting ones on the entire card for me. I see you nodding your head in approval of it right there. And another line that I saw when it opened, and I was stunned when I saw this line open. It is Calvin Kattar against Chris Fishgold. Calvin Kattar obviously would be in a lot different position if his last fight with Renato Moicano would have went a different way. However, now he finds himself against a former Cage Warriors. What was it? The lightweight?
Lightweight, yeah.
I was trying to make sure I had that right. He was the former Cage Warriors lightweight champion, making the drop to 145 pounds. I thought after that the UFC signed him that might be in his immediate future. But in a 17-1-1 record and getting no easy fights in his debut against the Boston finisher Calvin Kattar here. However, he is at plus 235, and I still think that's if you're even a bit optimistic about Fishgold in this fight, I'd pounce on plus 235.
100%. I agree, man. That line is off. This is the hardcore fans main event here. And for those that are unfamiliar with Chris Fishgold, like you mentioned, Cage Warriors lightweight champion, 17-1, 7 straight wins, 6 coming by first round finish. And he's not facing low level opposition here. He's getting finishes in one of the top European promotions in Cage Warriors. And I don't know for sure, but I think the reason to compete at lightweight had something to do with his teammate and close friend Paddy Pimblett being at 145 pounds, but I'm not certain on that.
Yeah, I forgot they were teammates. I knew that Fishgold came from Liverpool. I obviously probably should have put two and two together there. But hey, man, I mean, Fishgold with a win in this fight could potentially set up, you know, him and Darren Till going back to Liverpool in the future. Could be a budding prospect right here at the featherweight division for the UFC coming out of the land of the Scousers. However, while I do give credit to Fishgold and do say that this is not going to be an easy fight for Calvin Kattar whatsoever, I do think Kattar gets it done by decision.
Okay. And Kattar is good. He's really good. He's so technical on the feet. I could watch his sequence that put away Shane Burgos over and over again. And that fight, that was a fight of the year candidate, if you're asking me. Coming off that close loss, like you said, to Renato Moicano, but he's still a fighter to watch in the division. That line is off, though, and I'll be the first to tell you, I think actually Chris Fishgold might eke out a split decision here, and that's a good opportunity to pounce on a really undervalued line.
Yeah. No, I agree that the line is way off. I think it should be closer to even, to be honest with you. And then moving on to the UFC's most exciting division, the women's bantamweight division. We got a cracker here. There's like 18 fighters in the women's bantamweight division signed to the UFC right now. And these two happen to be two of the 3 or 4 that aren't ranked. It's Sarah Moras and Talita Bernardo. This is I feel like Bernardo is on the same kind of path that Guti is right now. It's either win or you're on the chopping block here. She would drop to 0-3 if she loses this fight.
Yeah, is Moras not ranked? I guess she's not ranked anymore. I know she was kind of hovering around 15 for a while. Talita Bernardo, this is actually a winnable fight for her somehow in the division with less fighters than any other. She draws a fighter that I think is actually a favorable matchup for her. Bernardo's UFC debut against Marion Renault came in on short notice, really controlled the grappling in that fight, was up, I would say, at least 2 rounds to 1 round at least, and would have won a decision had it gone that way, but finished in the 3rd round. Her last fight, though, absolutely outclassed by Irene Aldana. Sarah Moras, I mean, you can't really underestimate her. We saw that armbar finish of Ashley Evans-Smith, really her, I'd say, lone shining moment inside the UFC during her UFC stint, but really isn't overly dangerous anywhere. Regardless, neither of these fighters are going to make a run towards that top of the division. I will take the underdog Bernardo, though. I'll go submission in this one.
Yeah, I'm going with Moras. I'm going with the decision here. I don't really have a whole lot to say about that division really as a whole, to be honest with you. 3 of the girls in the top 10 are on maternity leave. So the featured Fight Pass prelim, though, let me say this.
Don't blink.
This is, yes. Oh my God, yes. But this is the most hyped I've been for a Fight Pass prelim not named Benavidez versus Pettis this year. Because again, you know, my segment for the MMA Takeover Octagon Jitters, where I for those that are listening that don't know, I preview every new UFC newcomer on every week of Fight Week on the card. That should be coming out at some point tomorrow. Don Madge and Tay Edwards will both be making their UFC debuts in this fight against each other. I cannot remember exactly off the top of my head. However, I know, you know, out of these guys combined 13 wins, I believe 12, if not all 13 of them, have come inside the first round by KO or TKO. You said it yourself, man. Do not blink. This fight could be over at any moment the second whoever is in there refereeing it tells them to begin.
This is awesome fight matchmaking. I thought for sure T. Edwards would kind of get a middling UFC lightweight one. He could put a highlight reel finish on, but no, they're going to give him one of the, I guess, most accomplished kickboxers that have been signed in recent years. Madge or Majay, I'm not sure how you pronounce it there, but he's 7-3, and all 3 losses are to the same fighter, and all of his wins are finishes. Edwards, though, I think is far more well-rounded. I have seen some tape on Edwards. I've seen some of his previous fights. We saw what he did on the Contender Series. Man, was that spectacular. I think he's got great speed.
Just hollered about it like 5 minutes ago.
His speed and athleticism will be the difference here, I think. And I'm excited to see what Madge can do in the octagon, but this is not an easy fight for him to get started. I'm going to say Edwards, and I'm going to actually go with a TKO, but it's going to be ground and pound. I think he'll be well prepared to make the adjustment and use that speed and athleticism, get this fight to the ground, and pound out a victory.
Yeah, man, I think Edwards gets the round 1 TKO. Again, though, do not blink. And odds right now are hovering around Edwards at -500. And for a guy like Don Madge, that would have a puncher's chance in every sense of the imagination, +385 that's a pretty solid value. I would say that's solid value. Not a bet I would take, but that's an attractive line. So moving on to the heavyweight division, it's Arjan Singh Bhullar, who is coming off of being only the 2nd recipient of an omoplata, to his disdain. He submitted to an omoplata put on by Adam Wieczorek.
Wieczorek?
Something like that. Wieczorek, I don't know. That was back in Glendale earlier this year in April. And he takes on Marcelo Golm, who last dropped, I believe, a decision to Tim Johnson down in Belém in February. Both guys looking to get back in the win column. Bhullar at -205, Golm at +175. My man, what do we have on this one?
Bhullar learned that lesson the hard way. First loss, getting omoplated in a fight that he was winning handily. He's a great wrestler, strong, powerful in his hands, comes from a great camp, TriStar. Golm had a good UFC debut, but I just don't see him being able to get Bhullar on his back and to utilize his strength, which is also that top position. So I'm going to go Bhullar here, TKO in the 2nd, use that wrestling, get him to the mat, and then just relentless ground and pound until Brazilian gives up.
I actually have Bhullar by decision. I think he's gonna use his grappling to his advantage. I don't know, not so sure he gets the finish. So I believe this fight's happening at lightweight, right? That's Stevie Ray and Justin Iari.
Yep. Iari's going down.
Yep, Iari is a normal welterweight. Stevie Ray coming off a controversial-ish loss in London to Cajun Johnson in a fight. I mean, I thought Stevie Ray won the fight. I don't think that it was anything outrageous. But on my scorecard, I thought Stevie Ray won the fight. And then Iari, his only loss in the UFC came to Darren Till. I cannot remember off the top of my head who his lone win in the UFC.
I think it was Jimmy Wallhead, a late notice split decision.
That's right. And he went to decision with Till as well. Stevie Ray 5-3 in the UFC. Looking to, I believe, snap a 2-fight skid. What do we have here on the curtain jerker?
Man, a lot of people are writing off Justin Iari right away, but I'm actually expecting to see an improved fighter here. He's taken some much-needed time off, relocated to American Top Team, full training camp down there, working a lot with Dean Thomas, as we've seen, has been a terrific coach mentoring the likes of Tyron Woodley, Amanda Nunes, a lot of up-and-comers as well. On the flip side, like you said, Stevie Ray, dire need of a win here. That nasty KO loss to Paul Felder with those elbows, split decision to Cajun Johnson. Could have gone either way. And Ray definitely more polished as a striker. I have not seen either competitor with a ground game of a very high level, or at least, anything to write home about. Expect this fight to be back and forth on the feet and stay there. Ray, I think, could catch him with a big left, but I don't see it going any way other than a decision here. And I'll take Stevie Ray, the unanimous decision. But I could see Ayari surprising some people, being far more improved than what we've seen out of him in the past.
Yeah, I agree. I think that this is a close fight. Ray is one of those guys that is tremendously skilled on the feet. You could go either way on this one. Ray at -165, Ayari at +145. I am going to go with Stevie Ray by decision here, and that wraps up the coverage of this fight card. I'm excited for this card, man. To be honest with you, I don't think I'm going to get to watch a lot of it though live. I don't normally miss fights like ever. However, Saturday I got to take some time out and hit up. You ever heard of Cedar Point, the amusement park?
Oh yeah, the huge I can't remember what's the big ride there that
the Top Thrill Riser.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
the parks in the country, or at least it's known as. I've never been, but love to check it out.
It's about an hour. It's about an hour or so away from here. Probably an hour and a half, hour if you step on it. And I'll be going there with my better half, and her nephew and niece have been dying for to go with us. So gotta. If you're gonna give one, you gotta be able to take one. So I do think I'll be able to watch the main card though. But
thankful for the world of DVR, man.
You know, yeah, or a YouTube TV. YouTube TV. That is the play. I'm serious. It is legit.
So that YouTube TV, does it offer the ability to watch live and or like on demand and DVR and everything like that? Yeah. See, that's what I'm hearing. I wish I could do it. That's my building's tied to a different provider.
Yes, sir. It is. It is so awesome because if you like hit like on a show, like if I hit like on UFC Tonight, it will automatically record it all, and it saves in the cloud, so there's no like limit to how much you save on your quote unquote DVR. So you could hit like on a ton of shows. It saves all of them, every episode of whatever show you want. It doesn't have like entire libraries of certain shows on demand, but it has, quite a bit. Like I should be able to watch the prelims, the FS1 portion of the prelims on YouTube TV.
Man, I feel for you. It's going to be a good card, that's for sure. You got a pick for fight of the night or any performance of the night bonuses going out?
I think performance of the night bonuses are going to go to Edwards and Volkan. Edwards and Volkan. I think fight of the night will probably. I could see Strickland and Celeb. I could also see Cater and Fishgold. Maybe Johnson and Lobov but only if Lobov is overly competitive with Johnson. However, obviously that might not happen. What do you think?
Yeah, Fishgold Cater. I think that the hardcore fans main event, that's going to be fight of the night. Hawk Perost and Ozdemir in the main event get the performance of the night bonuses.
Yeah, I meant Anthony Smith, but it could be Volkan, obviously.
Yeah. The winner of that fight, as we both agreed, it's not going the distance.
No way. Well, I believe that does it for us today. I'd like to thank you, my man, once again for coming on the program. And if you have any last thoughts or want to let everybody know where to find you on social media, the floor is yours to do so.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. Always a blast being on here. Love the Bottom Line podcast, and not just for MMA. It's hard to keep up for me and keeping, not in my younger days, can't keep SportsCenter on all day long, but I got that subscription to the Bottom Line to catch me up on college football and NFL, anything I missed there. Find me on Twitter at Trademark MMA. All my content's on MMAtoday.com. I'll definitely throw something out for this podcast as well. But thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it, and excited for the fights and to see how this trade news shakes out.
Yeah, man. Me too. Me too. We will be in touch, talking on it. And until then, we'll sign off. I'll see you later, my man.
Sounds good. Take care.
Yeah, you have a good one, man.